All right, gotta get Facebook connected here, and then we can get going on this wonderful Friday night. All right, just waiting on the green check marks. All right, and we're good. Thank you everyone for joining us on Friday night, the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Lance is headed out of his town for Father's Day weekend, which to all you fathers out there, I hope you guys have a wonderful Father's Day. So joining me is the one, the only Dylan Von Arks. Dylan, it's been a while since you and I have been able to sit on this. I think it was the live draft show. How you been?
Well, I'm definitely a lot more clear-headed than from that draft show. That was quite the long haul, but I'm doing good. I got my nap in today, so just hoping for some great conversation, and I'm sure that'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun to to sit down and talk about the Denver Broncos, especially with a lot of people that we get in the chat. Even though we don't always, agree with them, a lot of disagreements here, especially on Friday nights. It's still fun and enjoyable to talk about the Denver Broncos. So, I mean, our topic tonight, it's going to be Broncos on the roster bubble and who could take their spot. It's always that, it's you hear about this every single year, multiple times. Those guys right there, will they make it? Won't they? If they don't make it, who's going to take their spot? It's always a fun conversation to have. And with OTAs and, most of the offseason stuff wrapping up until a training camp, I think this is a good point because we get some idea, though OTAs and mini camps to me are, a bit overrated with how people take to them. Unpadded practices that are more so for conditioning and just getting the playbook down. There are still some things you can pick up. And before we get into the roster bubble, guys, I just wanted to ask you real quick about, got to talk about the quarterbacks here real quick. What do you think about this whole, Jarrett Stidham has been the most consistent. Bo Nix has been up and down, whereas Zach Wilson has basically been awful.
Yeah, depending on when you're hearing news from, Zach Wilson's the number one. I've seen some of that garbage floating around out there, but Stidham looking the best. I kind of expect that. Obviously, you're throwing against air for the most part, and he was in the system last year. And while he only got a few starts, he knows the playbook better than any of the other quarterbacks, especially Nix and Zach Wilson. So, and all the talk with Bo Nix, being maybe a little more erratic, making some good plays here, maybe some head scratchers. He's a rookie. I know he's got all that college experience, but game speed changes. That was obviously a concern for any rookie quarterback. So overall, not concerned. Like you mentioned, it's OTAs. It's kind of like when you watch a pro day.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can glean from it until the pads come on.
Yeah, you're basically just looking at the mechanics and trying to find what mechanical stuff you can clean up on. Which with Bo Nix, a lot of things that I've seen is in a lot of his throws been off the back foot. It was an issue that he had in college. It was one of the things, I think I talked about it multiple times. Can't remember for sure, but he threw off that back foot. I know when Luke Boglace joined me, he mentioned a little bit a lot of those back foot throws, just cutting that down. And the issue is when you're as experienced as Bo Nix is, it can be hard to fix those little mechanical inconsistencies. I trust Sean Payton to, put the work in and try to get that fixed. And, I don't think Bo Nix is going to, fight it or anything like that. I think he's going to take to it. So it's just those things of what have we gotten. I still think by week one, Bo Nix is a starter. I'm not putting a lot in this that there's an actual quarterback competition between him and Stidham. I think it's just a matter of they're just trying to, get Bo Nix along and caught up in the playbook because he's only been with the team for little over a month now. So, it's still, the mental side of it still has to be brought along. And, he's praised as being like a supercomputer, like being able to pick things up easily. Well, training camp, if he's struggling in training camp still, then I would start to, put more on, maybe there is a quarterback battle competition going on here.
Yeah, definitely. At least I agree with you completely there. And if there's a quarterback competition, it's who's going to be on the practice squad and who's going to be the number two.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, yeah, throwing off his back foot, unless you have a Josh Allen or Mahomes type arm where you can really sling it, that's going to be a problem. And obviously, Bo Nix doesn't have that. Talk about arm strength a lot when it comes to him, and obviously there's a difference between being able to throw a deep ball and how quick he can get from point A to point B. So, yeah, he's got to clean up those mechanics, and maybe he can get a little more mustard on his throws. But yeah, something that could definitely get worked out of his head. Hopefully, like you mentioned, he's a little older, he's more experienced, so it might be not pushback in the sense that he's not going to want to do it, but just how his brain's wired right now.
I mean, it's like with a lot of things, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult when you're so used to doing things one way to having to change it up. I know when I was working security, there was a certain way that we had to do everything. And then about a year before I ended up leaving, they wanted to change it up completely. And I just kept doing it the old way. And I kept getting dinged for that because it was so hard for me to break from what I was used to. I mean, 3 years doing the same thing every day for 8 hours a day, basically. It's tough to break that break those kinds of habits. And again, as I was saying, I think Bo Nix is going to put in the work to try to break those habits, tear it down a little bit to be built back up. But we got a couple people in the chat. Chat's not, hopping right now. Hopefully it'll pick up a little bit, but we understand it is a Friday night. It is a summer, and I believe for the most part, it's pretty nice out throughout the country. But we have David Youngkin coming in saying he's still in the hospital for at least 2 more months. Well, David, I hope everything's okay. I hope whatever has you in the hospital gets taken care of, and can't wait to get you back in here. And we have Kevin Gray coming in saying, "Evening Broncos country, Dylan and Eric and Scott. I had to sell my house after the 8th. I'm moving to Phoenix now. I have to figure out how to watch the games." Oh, Phoenix. I don't think I don't think I could live in Arizona. I would die. It's way too hot. Drove through it once, and that was more than enough for me.
Yeah, man, nothing but concrete and heat bouncing off it. Up here in California, it gets pretty warm, especially during summer. I think the highest last year was like around 105, 106. I can't even imagine being in Phoenix. It's even worse there.
Yeah, I mean, so weird story about Phoenix. One time, my mom and I were flying down to Denver, and I remember this. It was just after it was a really snowy game between the Broncos and the Raiders. And it was such a bad snowstorm that our flight actually got delayed and then got changed. So we ended up having to fly from Denver to Phoenix to Minneapolis to Seattle back to Anchorage. Weirdest flight I've ever had. But that's my only Phoenix story. I think the only other time I was in Arizona, I was in somewhere else. I can't remember where now. Tucson, I think. But anyways, we're here to talk about Broncos football and figuring out how to watch games. That's always a difficult part. I know I struggle with that, and I can't talk about how I find the games to watch because it's gotta be quiet about it, but it can be difficult to do. So getting to guys on the roster bubble, who would you say is probably the easiest guy to say that he's definitely on the bubble? Who would be your easiest one for that?
Oh, it's between two guys, but I think I'm gonna go with Damari Mathis. I think there's been a lot of talent added to that room, especially you get Abrams drain. They clearly like Riley Moss. Levi Wallace was brought in, and it's kind of where does Mathis fit, especially after last year getting replaced by a street free agent. And it's the same. Vance Joseph is still here. We'll see if he can maybe pick things up being in a year in the system, but maybe it's just a sophomore slump. Hopefully that's the case, but if not, he's looking on getting possibly released here.
Yeah, and Kevin Gray coming in. That's where my family is. My wife passed, so I couldn't say, I'm sorry to hear that. Hope everything's going well outside of that. Definitely my condolences there. And Phil McLaughlin coming in. So good evening, Eric and Dylan. Don't be knocking Arizona. LOL. I moved from Boulder to Denver, and I love it here in Tucson. It's a dry heat. Hashtag Buckham. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag Broncos for life. Yeah, dry heat. I would rather it be hot and humid than hot and dry. That's just me personally, which is what makes Arizona so hard for me. Going back to Damari Mathis, I think you're pretty spot on. I wouldn't be surprised if they float around, some possibility of moving him back a little bit to safety with his skill set and everything. Because even last year before he got benched, when he was playing off and keeping plays in front of him, he wasn't doing too terribly. It was when, he had to sit there and play man, had to sit there and really stick with the guy, or, basically play a little bit closer to the line. That's where the issues really popped up. So I still have I'm still curious to see what they're going to do with this coverage unit. If they're still going to continue to be more man and press and or try to be more man and press heavy and really take advantage of Patrick Surtain, or be more zone, which they ran almost 60% of the time last year. And most of that came after, the defensive change after, what was it, week 4, I think, after their first win. But as for the talent, I mean, Chris Abrams-Drain, Levi Wallace, both of them added to the room. They're, Levi Wallace is expected right now to be the starter opposite Patrick Surtain, but Riley Moss has been putting in the work and supposedly had a really good, OTAs to sit there and add some competition for it. And then you have to have, I doubt Tremont Smith gets cut because of what he can do as a gunner, and Jaquan McMillan. Well, right there's 6 players, and Damari Mathis is left out. So he's got to do something to step up, either even on maybe on special teams, and try to be a replacement for Tremont Smith there and help them save some money. But yeah, Damari Mathis is a tough one to see making this roster just because of numbers and how rough things have been for him.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, maybe he's gonna have to play more special teams. I think that's definitely somewhere where he could get some more snaps. Moving him to safety is not a terrible idea, especially with Drew Sanders going down. Like, it's pretty thin at linebacker. You're probably going to be using some more safeties, so that's somewhere he could look to maybe get some snaps. It was just disappointing, especially obviously his rookie year started out a little rocky when he got thrust in, but he kind of found his way, it seemed, throughout the season, and then just the drop off this year. It's pretty disappointing to see.
Yeah, and Chase Wallner coming in with a pretty good question is, I believe this has been talked about before, but Peyton was trying to have Vance Joseph run a system he isn't familiar with to start last year, correct? That is correct. He was trying to have him run, that match quarters, cover 4, cover 6 heavy system that Vic Fangio used, and even Evero used to an extent. Evero used a lot more cover 3, and cover 2, cover 3 is where Vance Joseph is. He still kept a lot of the Evero cover 3 elements in, with his own spin on it and a lot more cover 2. But the cover 4, cover 6 stuff, that's what they were running a lot more the first couple games. And then I think they were really running it even like the most in that Dolphins game. And we saw what happened there. And on top of that, with being unfamiliar with that system, he didn't know the right calls for the right system. And that was something that I really lit into Vance Joseph about after that Miami Dolphins game. I mean, he's calling plays on third down that have his corners turning their backs to the receivers and the quarterbacks, which is something that that's fundamentally incorrect when you get to football. You just can't do that. So yeah, that is definitely a big issue they had. And I think that after the turnabout the defense had, when they started to go with things more Vance Joseph more comfortable with, I'm making the assumption that they'll continue with that and let Vance Joseph, continue to run what he is more comfortable and familiar with running.
Yeah, and hopefully that'll show some improvement from the defense, because obviously it was outside of that turnover streak. It was pretty dreadful. Like you mentioned, the Dolphins game, that Lions game late in the season, that was terrible. And obviously, the talent wasn't there as well, especially on the defensive line, and that looks to be much improved. Hopefully, DJ Jones can play in his more natural spot. You got Franklin Myers on there now and getting some push up the middle, which is something we haven't had in a while, and pair that with Zach Allen. Hopefully we can stop the run. Just be middle of the pack, Let's try and not shoot for the stars necessarily. Let's just go up a little bit. Set some short-term goals there.
Yeah, and that's one thing is I think the talent level last year on defense was vastly overrated by so many, especially on the defensive line. Jonathan Harris and Mike Purcell were god awful last year. And when watching this defense and then doing the shows and seeing fan reactions to it, it's funny because the ones who were actually playing decent got a lot more heat than the ones playing poorly. And so that's one thing, but it was a tough ask of Vance Joseph, and I'm not trying to defend it by any means. I mean, I flat out wrote an article last year saying that he should have been fired, or step up and say, let's not run what we're running. Let me run what I run. But didn't have a lot of defense, a lot of talent to work with. Injuries, they hit that defense pretty hard, and then just being forced to run something that he's not familiar with to start, and then by the time you're allowed to flip, you're already in the season, and that just makes it a little bit more difficult. But Yeah, I mean that turnover, the historic turnover streak that they had for that game win streak. Outside of that, man, this defense was awful. I mean, the worst run defense unit. They just were completely terrible all around. Having to run, part of why they ended up having to run so much more cover three zone coverages is because they couldn't get any pressure up front without blitzing. So you have to blitz more, and then you have to drip play zone to counter out the vacancies that you have in coverage. Whereas in man, you don't have those vacancies if you're not blitzing. So it was really rough. So hopefully we can see some improvement this year overall in this defense. It's definitely a lot more talented. And Phil McLaughlin coming in and saying, maybe I am prejudiced, but it just feels like there's a coach that can get our defense in the top 10. I think that the talent that they have this year, with the right coaching, they could be a top 10 defense. Last year, I still would have said that top 16 would have been exceeding my expectations with where they're at last year. But this year, with the additions that they've made, especially on that defensive line, I could see, even without Justin Simmons too, I could make the argument for this being a potential top 10 unit.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what your opinion on this, but I think we might agree. I think Vance Joseph is just a placeholder for Jim Leonard at this point.
Yeah.
He works with DBs well, and that's an area where the Broncos need to get stronger, especially safety. It's kind of that room scares me quite a bit, and obviously he brought some guys in to be opposite Surtain, and McMillan looked good. He looked, for the most part, he had some rough spots, but I just hate seeing Surtain in zone so much, especially he excels at being man corner, and the part of the reason Surtain didn't play as well last year, he didn't have a great defensive line in front of him. He's trying to cover guys for like 7+ seconds. That's a no-no. And you look at, and I've mentioned a lot before, the Deron Bland and Sauce Gardner, they got all the all-pro votes. Like, what did they have in front of them? An outstanding defensive line. So, like we mentioned, hopefully that play gets elevated with some of the new pieces, and we'll see what Vance Joseph can do.
Yeah, Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, good evening, Eric and Dylan on Dove Valley Divers Go Broncos. Thank you, Dylan, for joining us. I am sure there are some, what are they, stars on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Behind that. Unfortunately, we don't have Scott with us, so we don't know for sure. Or I don't know for sure. I think Dylan has it up on his side.
Those are some stars.
Everything. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate that. We appreciate you too, Phil. And going back to Patrick Surtain real quick, even though, not roster bubble like the topic is, but I think he really hit the nail on the head about the talent up front and trying to get him to play more man than zone. So I just did, been doing player profiles, and I actually just sent in my Patrick Surtain one on Wednesday. And basically the whole point is that either Denver needs to play him in man more, or he's got to get better in zone. And they can help him out by improving the front, getting more pressure, which they've added the pieces to do that. But there's still some issues with him with his technique and stuff in zone that can still be improved. But the biggest thing was, are you familiar with who Cody Alexander is?
Vaguely.
He's I think he's a coach somewhere, but he does a lot of Twitter breakdown stuff like that. And he does a lot with with coverages and defensive backs in particular. And for his scoring, he had Pat Surtain as the 5th best man corner out of like 163, I think is what it was. And Surtain, despite the issues he had in zone, was still 43rd in zone coverage, which still 43rd out of 163 or whatever it was is still really good. It was definitely in the top half.
Mm-hmm.
There's still some room for improvement there. Whereas some of these other guys that you think about, guys that you mentioned, they were more consistent between the two. I think Deron Bland was in like the top 10 for one, and then the top 15 for the other. And Sauce Gardner was top 20 and top 5, I think, for between the two of them. I can't remember exactly for sure off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, corners, they require a lot of help. You want to get the quarterback to get rid of the ball quicker. The less time they have to cover, the better it is, the more likely they are to make plays, and the less time they have to try to run with somebody, because they can't cover forever. Even the best corners can't cover forever. So that's definitely got to improve. And I am with you with Vance Joseph just being a placeholder at this point. I think he is I think he's definitely the scapegoat. Russell Wilson was essentially the scapegoat for year 1. Vance Joseph is the scapegoat for year 2. And then maybe George Payton for year 3, depending on how things go. But and going back to the topic at hand, the guy who, to me, who's the most obvious one on the roster bubble, Samaje Perine. I mean, with the way they used him last year, it's replaceable. There's been a lot of hype about Javonte Williams through OTAs, even though there's still been some conversation about will he or won't he make the roster. Jaleel McLaughlin tore it up at OTAs, which was expected. Unpadded practices, things like that. They benefit these smaller, faster guys. But Audric Estime with his skill set and Blake Watson with his skill set, right there you have guys that can replace what you get out of Samaje Perine. Estime, his play as a receiver and a blocker was rather underrated throughout the draft process. He's this big, powerful back who's reliable in short yarded situations, and ball security wasn't a major issue with him, unlike with Samaje Perine. And then Blake Watson, well, he's not quite as fast as Jaleel McLaughlin. He's still that quicker, speedy guy with the agility to still go out there and make plays. And I really do think that they're going to be looking at him for special teams. So between the two, I still think that I do think that Samaje Perine, they'll keep 4 running backs and Perine's the one out.
Yeah, Perine was more of a receiver than he was a running back last season. And obviously, like you mentioned, you got Estime very underrated in the passing game. You could even get Blake Watson out there. He's great in that area. He just, and like you mentioned, his fumbles as well. Obviously, he recovered a couple of them, but you still don't want to see that. That's not going to happen every time because typically when you're fumbling, it's going towards the defense. I just don't see a place where he's on this roster. I'm not sure that he gets cut. Maybe you could trade him for some low round pick a year from now or so. But I do like Audric Estime a ton. And like you mentioned, Javonte, we're still not completely sure what he's going to look like and how the team feels about him. He's had issues with his vision. We'll see how his knee holds up in the second year coming off of it. But for obvious reasons, he didn't have much explosion last year. Yeah. But he also wasn't drafted by Sean Payton. So if his new guy coming in, he likes him more, and he kind of mirrors what Javonte does, except with better vision, probably a little better in the passing game. And it's just Perine's probably obsolete there.
Yeah, and going with Williams here, Chase Wallner coming in. Some people are entertaining Javonte being on the roster bubble. You guys think that's overkill? William adding some context, saying Chase apparently Mace and Cecil, and people have been watching Pookie are saying he looks bad right now. I've heard that he's looked fine, not great, but not terrible. Everything I've heard saying that he should be making the roster with where they're at. But adding to this is, you said it, he wasn't a draft pick of Sean Payton. The injury, ACL and LCL injuries, those are essentially death sentences for running backs. Very, very rarely do they come back. Very rarely does a player from at any position come back from ACL and LCL tears like Williams does. Which Williams, I just got my profile of him published yesterday, I want to say. He finished out the season with like a 3.1 yard per carry average, just completely faded down the stretch despite a decent start. And then he's on the final year of his contract. And that right there, and it's a tradable contract. Teams are going to try to teams might be interested of like, all right, we'll give you a year and possibly extend you afterwards, but we'll see. And I think that's kind of the attitude Denver will have. Keep him, see what he has. If he's not doing it, maybe they look at trading him before the trade deadline. If not, they let him walk and hope some other team bites, and maybe they can get some kind of like compensatory pick for him if they're playing the compensatory pick game. I have a hard time seeing him cut, but I think Perine will go first. And then at that point, I think it comes down to a numbers game and how good Estime looks. If Estime goes out there and kills it, McLaughlin kills it, and Watson kill it, then maybe both Williams and Perine are on the way out. But Perine, speaking of him, you mentioned possibly trading him. He does have a pretty tradable contract. It'd be 1 year. A new team would pick him up for $3 million. Denver would hold $1.5 million in dead cap, which is from his signing bonus that he signed. So it's decent enough. 3 million for a year for a running back who can contribute in the running game, especially some of these other teams, like I believe the Bengals at the running back position, who he was with. Let me pull it up real quick. Are awful at the running back position because I can't remember what they've done. I mean, they have Chase Brown, who is entering his second year, and then Zach Moss, who injury concerns galore. Like, yeah, I mean, they could use somebody, and he was doing well for them. So maybe they decide to get in there on a draft pick. Anybody, another player that you think that's have on the bubble there?
Yeah, not like a huge name, but I do think in the tight end room, I think they keep probably 4. I think Nate Adkins could get edged out for a Dylan Leonard, who's played at Georgia Tech. Great
Dylan Leonard
blocking.
was just cut.
Oh, he was? Well, shoot,
Yeah.
goes that. Damn.
Yeah. And actually, Michael comes in. Erick and Dylan, thoughts on the signing of linebacker Andre Smith for depth and special teams. Dylan Leonard was the one that was let go to make room for Andre Smith. And
Gotcha.
Michael, we'll come back to that here in a second.
Yeah, that's a bummer because that's my first and middle name. So I was kind of pulling for that just for the hell of it. Other ones, I think in terms of the wide receiver room, you're going to see something similar to last year, where let's say Sutton, he'll be here. We got Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Mims, Troy Franklin, and we'll say Tim Patrick. Apparently, he's been looking good. But after that, it's a lot of guys who are probably just going to be on the practice squad, being game day call-ups, much like they did last year. I mean, I like little Jordan Humphrey. You got Brandon Johnson, Michael Bandy's still there, Devon Vele, guys that I'm not really concerned about other teams snatching up.
Yeah, and with the rules with the practice squad call-ups, I like what Denver did last year, what Sean Payton did with playing that call-up game with the receivers, more matchup specific guys for that final receiver spot kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, and I do kind of expect him to do the same thing. And when you look at this, you have a clear, like, I don't know, top 2, top 3, maybe even top 4 if you want to throw Mims in there. To me, Mims isn't quite in that clear, guys. I mean, he'll make the roster, don't get me wrong, but we got to see so much improvement from him on offense. Special teams was great, but the offensive stuff was a letdown. But Sutton, I mean, he might get moved still. So Josh Reynolds, Troy Franklin, and I think Tim Patrick will likely make it. Everything I've heard is that he's been looking really good. Doesn't look like he's missed 2 years at all. His conditioning was really good. And then, so like, as you're saying, Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil, Philip Dorsett, and Lil Jordan Humphrey, those are guys there that can be competing for that final spot. And obviously you don't have room for all of them. And maybe it is a situation where Denver just keeps the 5, Reynolds, Franklin, Mims, Sutton, and Patrick, and just rotates those other guys off the practice squad like they did last year. Wide receiver for me is one of the hardest positions to pin down right now, just because there is so much unknown. Cortland Sutton, will he be with the team even to start the season? Where exactly is Tim Patrick at? How much will Marvin Mims improve? Where will Troy Franklin improve? Can he be a consistent contributor as a rookie? Josh Reynolds is about the most consistent thing, but he's still got a question: is can he be more than a number 3 guy? So there's so many questions with this wide receiver room that is probably, for me, it's the toughest one to pin down. But there is a lot of competition going on at that position.
Yeah, me and Lance a couple weeks ago now, when we broke down like the AFC West rosters and who had the strongest where, I got a lot of pushback for saying the Broncos probably had the weakest room. Obviously, the Chargers have some young guys there, unproven, but I like their upside a lot more. And I just think the passing weapons here have been overrated for a couple of years now. And I'm higher on Sutton than most people, but like you mentioned, beyond that, Josh Reynolds, is he going to be more than a number 3? Mims, can you run more than a 9 route? Like, he needs to diversify his route tree for sure. And then, Franklin, he's tall, he's a rookie, he's got the connection with Bo Nix, but he weighs as much as me. He's 6'2", and like, it's just, that frame kind of scares me a little bit. And then Tim Patrick, you never know with the knee how he's going to come back. So definitely a lot of competition in that room. We'll just see how it goes this season. Outside of Sutton, I'm kind of concerned there.
And I had to pull it up since you mentioned about Denver having the worst one. To me, it's very clearly that they're either 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I can make the argument either way, looking at the Chargers depth chart too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential in that room. And
yeah,
they have more names, recognizable names with how they've invested in it than Denver does. And Denver has just been a bunch of guys that are a lot more questionable and consistent issues when it comes to the receiver room, specifically. Anyways, as for the signing of Andre Smith for depth and special teams, I can't remember who was it. Maybe you'll know. Was it Andre Smith or Lavelle Bailey that Peyton just recently brought up as this is a guy who has a chance to start?
I believe that was Bailey.
Okay. I couldn't remember for sure. I remember catching it and passing. Just this week has been crazy busy. So scrolling through Twitter real quick, and I saw that, and I also saw the signing of Smith. So I might have been getting my wires crossed here. Smith, I wouldn't expect it personally with what I have seen of him. Obviously, I haven't seen a lot. He didn't play a whole lot on defense for the Falcons last year. I wouldn't think a whole lot of him on defense. But special teams, he's a pretty good special teams player, and maybe he can upgrade from Justin Cernod there. And Justin Cernod has been playing well on special teams over the last few years. It's a good signing and adds competition there, and helps push everybody. And because you got to find somebody to replace Josie Jewell. And I mean, I did an article on Cody Barton, and I just completely ripped the Broncos to shreds for their very poor attempt at replacing Josie Jewell.
Yeah, I've been defending Josie Jewell for a while. Obviously, I don't think he's this all-star player. I'm never expected him to be, but he's a solid guy on that defense. And I just think the perception of what the inside linebacker is from fans is warped. You're not going to neutralize a Travis Kelce or, it's just you're there to slow him down. But if you're expecting him to be Fred Warner, like, good luck. There's only one Fred Warner, Luke Kuechly, those guys. It's even worse this season. I mean, Singleton's fine. He makes a lot of tackles, but he also misses a lot, or he'll make a boneheaded play like pushing over CJ Stroud because he got goaded into it by our rookie quarterback. And like you mentioned, Cody Barton, I mean, his back's always just turned. He's never he's supposedly, he's better in coverage, but I just don't love it. And
the way he's better in coverage is he just gets he allows a lot of short completions that the team rallies to and makes a tackle for, which is great. But those really cloud and when you get to Pro Football Focus grades and all this stuff like that, and this is one of my many issues with Pro Football Focus grades. When you get to those kinds of plays really help cover for these plays where he's getting beat, 10 yards downfield because he's just lost and confused in coverage. But when you watch it, you see these happen all the time. And it could be, there's multiple instances where that was the case. And he just wasn't his guy wasn't the one targeted because there was a better option somewhere, or Sam Howell and that offensive line just completely flubbed it all and ended up having to go somewhere or getting in a sack. Cody Barton is a terrible attempt to, the worst you could have done to try to replace Josie Jewell. Well, I'm with you. He's not some great guy. He's solid. He's probably a top 20 linebacker in the NFL, which when you think about it, most teams, 32 teams, most of them have two. That top 20 is top half. For it. He's a top half linebacker, but not top 10, not top 15. He's reliable. He's a good communicator. Some injury concerns, yes. You can blitz well, but he was a little bit more versatile than Alex Singleton. And it absolutely blew my mind over this last year seeing all the hate for Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton getting a pass for all these issues. I mean, what game was it? Was it I can't remember if it was the Commanders game or the Dolphins game, but Jewell was dropping back and Singleton blew his coverage. So Jewell had to make the decision of, do I take the guy behind me or do I take the guy in front of me? And with the safety taking deep, he chose the guy in front of him, and the quarterback just played it right underneath the safety and allowed a big play. Jewell got a lot of flag for that. In a way, rightfully so, but Alex Singleton is the one who blew the play from the start because he decides to go take a running back when there was a corner on the running back already. And it's just mind-boggling me watching, Alex Singleton make mistakes like that week in, week out and get a pass for it, yet Josie Jewell sucks. Josie Jewell is a pretty solid coverage linebacker, pretty solid run defending linebacker, just solid all the way around. And it showed with what the Panthers paid him. I mean, yeah, you can end up failing on these pays or on these signings and everything, but your value is what players say you were. None of us may agree that Jerry Jeudy is worth what the Cleveland Browns gave him, but that doesn't matter. The Browns thought he was worth that much, and that's all that matters at that point. Josie Jewell got a $6 million average per year basis paycheck. Cody Barton got a $2 million. So, yeah, linebacker, it's rough. And getting to linebacker or staying on linebacker, I think that, speaking of guys on the roster bubble, I mentioned him already, Justin Strnad. Not only Andre Smith, but Lavelle Bailey, a guy who might have been the one that Sean Payton, I'm pretty sure you're right now that I think about it, that he was the one that Sean Payton mentioned as having a good chance or being a good piece of the competition to start. So yeah, I think Justin Strnad, and how bummer would it be for him to have been, all right, I'm signing with the Panthers. Oh no, you want me back? I'll come back only to get cut. That would be kind of a bummer.
Yeah, he maybe the Panthers still want a special teams guy and he could sneak his way over there, but yeah, hopefully one of these linebackers works out, because obviously Vance Joseph was, or even Sean Payton, whoever was trying to flip around Drew Sanders before he got hurt, obviously, and I don't understand it. His size playing at edge, like and taking him, where they did. It's let's just keep him in one spot. It's not like with Baron Browning, where I still get people telling me he should have stuck it inside linebacker when he's more valuable off the edge. But I guess you can kind of go either way with Drew Sanders. But yeah, linebacker needs to get fixed. Another guy that popped into my head that got a lot of ridicule when he was here was Todd Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And he was good at what he did, and a lot of fans got mad because he wasn't good coverage. It's like, that's really not his game.
No.
And it sucks because he was a really solid linebacker for a few years there.
Todd Davis was the Alex Singleton of the defense there for when he was here.
Yeah.
Like, what Alex Singleton brings is what Todd Davis does. And as much as I crap on Alex Singleton for coverage, he's a good run defender, and that's what he's there to do. And so you need somebody who can handle coverage beside him, and that's not Cody Barton.
No.
That's not Justin Strnad. I don't think that. Maybe that's Jonas Griffith. Maybe they have high hopes for him coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And back to your point that you're saying about Baron Browning at edge and Drew Sanders, the huge difference here is when you look at what they both can do. Baron Browning was made and built for the edge. Drew Sanders was not.
Exactly.
And when you watch them play, it is very obvious. I have never seen worse edge play in my life than watching Drew Sanders play edge to close out the season. It was terrible, and it was so frustrating to watch. Because honestly, edge defense, it's intricate, don't get me wrong, but it's not overly complicated as to what your goal is there. 55% of the time, 60% of the time, your goal is to go hit the quarterback, get by your blocker, go hit the quarterback. And yeah, the techniques to do that matters and everything like that. And then edge defenses, hold your block, read the play. It's not overly difficult, but Sanders looked more lost playing edge than he did linebacker to start last season. And it was so frustrating. And yeah, this linebacker room, I I've gone back and forth on this. I don't know if I'm more concerned about the safety room or the linebacker room on this defense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the safety room, and it's you got Brandon Jones, who he was a third safety for his career, so it's like, how's he going to look if he's in a starting role? Caden Stearns, can't trust him to stay healthy. I do really like PJ Locke, and I hope he can kind of replicate what he did last season. We'll have to wait and see. Turner Yell, special teams guy. JL Skinner, I'm actually pretty intrigued by, especially with the lower number of linebackers. Maybe he could find a spot there, covering tight ends and whatnot, maybe working a little closer to the line of scrimmage. We'll see. Not very inspiring, though. It's a lot of maybe we'll see, especially with how Vance Joseph and his rookies, he doesn't play them too often. We saw with Moss, maybe he was up to snuff in practice or whatnot. Not entirely sure there, but once JL Skinner was healthy, he didn't see any playing time either, really, outside of a little bit on special teams, I believe. So it's really hard to pick which one's worse. I mean,
I did the math, and by the time that if Caden Stearns starts, he will have played 2 snaps at the season opener. He'll have played 2 snaps in like 703 days.
That's despicable.
Like, that is so concerning. And Brendan Jones, as a third linebacker rotational guy, he did great at that. But can he step up? And PJ Locke, as good as he was, there are still areas for clear improvement that we need to see. And for me personally, I kind of go linebacker is worse, just simply because I'm willing to hang my hat on PJ Locke improving and carrying that room more so than Alex Singleton stepping up and carrying that room.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only reason why I'd give that edge there. But both of them are rather concerning. And staying on safety, because another guy that I have that's on the roster bubble, Delarian Turner-Yell. I mean, when he's seen the field, it's been terrible. Mm-hmm. And the Broncos have kind of sent a message. They brought in 2 undrafted free agents and at safety, and then they have 2 guys that they're carrying over from last year. And yeah, I mean, they're not happy with the safety room, obviously, and especially the depth. And Delarian Turner-Yell, it's not like he was fine on special teams, but it's not like he was, this is a must-have type of guy on special teams, similar to like kind of what you get out of, Tremon Smith, where his play as a gunner is, we don't want to lose that unless we can have somebody better than that. Delarian Turner-Yell is not that level. And as long as one of these guys can show a little bit better than him on special teams, or even on defense, and maybe even a little bit worse on special teams, and go for that heavier defense ability, I could see Delarian Turner-Yell out, and especially adding the fact that he wasn't a Sean Payton pick.
Yeah, and it's just, and there's obviously some people have talked about Riley Moss maybe moving to safety, but I think this year they probably want to keep him at corner before they decide to make that move. And like you mentioned, they brought in some undrafted free agents. Omar Bolin, we'll see how he plays. But if someone's even just a little bit better, whether it's on defense or special teams, I think, he could get the boot, get promoted to free agent.
And on that is like with Riley Moss, it's always been where will he end up. I think that they're more than fine giving him a shot at cornerback this year and seeing what he can do. And if he struggles there, then maybe next year have that discussion.
Yeah.
We talked about him already, but Damari Mathis, maybe it is a situation of Damari Mathis replaces Delarian Turner-Yell as that 5th safety, 6th safety, whatever you want to call him. And he's going to add special teams and help with the versatility, at least, too, of being a defensive back that can play multiple positions in the secondary and play on special teams, because Delarian Turner-Yell, all you're getting out of him is special teams, because you can't trust him at all to play on defense. Especially after what we saw last season. Like, normally it's, with certain positions, it's 3 years. Safety is one of them, typically. But when you see them be as bad as he has been over the last 2, he doesn't get that 3rd year from me.
Yeah, it's rough, and definitely I think that's an interesting point to bring up. Maybe Mathis does make the roster just because he's more versatile, and we've seen he can play defense. Whether he bounces back, that's we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, a guy like Turner Yell, he could definitely get moved off this roster just because Mathis is probably desperate, and he's like, you know what, I can play anywhere. Just call me a DB. Don't designate me as a corner or a safety. Just put me where you need me. I'll play on special teams too. I could definitely see that happening.
And Phil McLaughlin coming in. Well, guys, listening to your doom and gloom, I'm going to be happy with 5 wins. We're not trying to be all doom and gloom. We're just talking about guys on the roster bubble, which tend to be at positions of concern. So let's flip the page a little bit. Going away from the roster bubble, what are some things with this team that you're excited to see and excited for this season? Because there's one that's so high in my book, and if you know me and know where the positions that I love to focus on, it should be obvious. But I'm so excited for this defensive line.
Yes. Oh my God. And that's the thing. Like when we were talking about linebackers, it's like they might be, at least last year, they had to make more plays because the defensive line was letting runners break through left and right. Yeah, I remember when we were on the draft pod and it was a little bit of a lull between picks, and that John Franklin Myers news came up, and we all jumped up. Like, that's an amazing addition. He's got a good pressure rate, which is something we need up the middle, especially. Can't have our I mean, obviously our edge room's not terrible. I like a lot of them. I don't love them. You know, maybe if Baron Browning was not injured all the time, maybe we'd have something more there. But yeah, just I love the pairing of Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, and DJ Jones on that front. I think that's going to be so much more improved. Probably the most improved group in this offseason. I know some people say quarterback, but no.
That's how we see it from Bo Nix. Like
exactly, yeah. It's and it'll just be nice to hopefully get some push up the middle. And like I mentioned before, let's try and be middle of the pack or run defense. You know, let's try and just incremental jumps there because.
And what was it? Not. Oh no, it was covering tight ends. They were second worst to Cincinnati, and I think in run defense in this analytic, they were third worst. Like, and a lot of it falls on Alex Singleton, Jonathan Harris, and Mike Purcell, because they were able to pin it down on who it was. And one thing with linebackers, as much crap as we talked about them, improving the defensive line in front of them can help them improve and help them do better. So yeah, I mean, and not just the three that you mentioned, but Malcolm Roach too. I was really not. I don't want to say I was down on the signing when it happened. I wasn't as high, but the more I watch him, the more hype I am for him. At first couple games I watched him, he was like, all right, he's a pretty solid run defender. He's a reliable run defender. No, he's a good run defender. I don't want to say really good. He is a good run defender. He is a reliable, strong run defender. Doesn't bring much of anything as a pass rusher, but you can rotate him and DJ Jones as your nose tackle or your one technique or two technique, and you have a pass rusher and DJ Jones at the middle, or Malcolm Roach as a run defender. And DJ Jones is no slouch against the run either when he's playing well, which we didn't get last year. And then Jonathan and Franklin Myers, and then and Zach Allen. With Zach Allen, last year there were so many advanced analytics where he was just outside the top 5 for interior defensive linemen. And with how slow of a start he had, those first 3 or 4 weeks from him were terrible. And then just bam. And had he the first 4 games matched the rest of the season, he would have been like number 2 or number 3 in almost every single one of these advanced analytics that I was looking at. It was absolutely tremendous, the turnaround that we got out of him. And then with Baron Browning, since you mentioned on it, if he could stay healthy, he could be the Batman that this team needs. But can he stay healthy? At that Packers game that we did the meet and greet last year, he was exceptional, and that was his first game back. And I don't think a lot of people realize just how good he was that game, even though he didn't, exactly tear up the stat sheet. Yeah. He was really good in that game and contributed a lot to the success the defense had in that. And then Benito, Cooper, and maybe Ellis, they can be good rotational guys and solid second guys. I still have a lot of concerns about the run defense from the group, but your defensive line should be able to ease a lot of that. I'm not just the defensive line. I'm excited to watch these the defensive line and edges work together and hopefully see them be able to get pressure with 4 instead of having to consistently blitz.
Yeah, one matchup that scares me this season is twice. Well, I guess it'd be twice against the Chargers with those tackles, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. That's going to be a rough one for Benito. I feel like in particular, it's just 2 stone walls on each side, and I mean, obviously Harbaugh is going to want to run the ball a lot, but when they go to throw, you're going to be relying on that push up the middle because the edge guys, I don't want to say they'll be completely neutralized, but it's a difficult matchup there.
And then another position group, and I think this is probably the one that most of Broncos country are excited for, and it's definitely carried by one player, the guards, with Quinn Miners especially, and hopefully we get improvement out of Ben Powers. He wasn't terrible last year. Definite areas of improvement. Quinn Miners still has to improve in pass protection a little bit. But man, these two, especially if Ben Powers can get back to what he's doing with the Ravens, they could just run the ball consistently down defensive line's throats. Center obviously has to be figured out still, but these 2 guards, man, they are quite capable run blockers that can just create openings for the running backs. And I am so excited to watch them. I prioritize, the trenches. That's where I focus on. That's where I specialize at, I guess would be the best way to put it, and have for years. So I am so excited for the trench play on both sides of it, particularly the guards on the offensive side.
Yeah, that's going to be really important running the ball this year, especially with a rookie quarterback or any quarterback for that matter. Take some pressure off them. I'm excited to see, and like you mentioned, Ben Powers. Hopefully, he gets back to where he was with the Ravens because running the ball, hammering it with Audric Estime, get some thunder and lightning with Blake Watson, maybe Jaleel. That's kind of where this team needs to be this year. And like you mentioned, center is. I don't really know what to think about who's going to be there yet. Obviously, through OTAs and stuff, you're not really going to hear anything. There's no pads. I really don't know who's going to win that job.
Yeah, a lot of people are handing it to Alex Forsyth because of the familiarity from Oregon with Bo Nix. I wouldn't count out Luke Wattenberg. From everything I've heard, is that he improved a lot over this last year. I mean, we saw it last year on the field. Granted, most of it came at guard. He looked much improved compared to his rookie. And then Sam Mustipher, they brought him in for experience. And even though I'm down on him, the team seems to be high on him. So I think there's a true competition here at center between these 3 guys for who the starting one is. My hope is that it's Alex Forsyth. I really liked what he did in tape. I felt he should have gotten drafted higher if it wasn't for an injury that kept him from participating throughout the draft process. And I think that he would fit in perfectly fine with the run blocking front with Ben Powers and Quinn Miners. But, time will tell and we'll have to see. And then Mike Edel coming in. Wow, with the $5 donation. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. Wow, the negative here is killing me. You don't think Benito can beat a rookie tackle? We aren't that bad. Come on, man. It's not that he can't beat him. It's just that Joe Alt is tough. There's a reason why he was drafted as high as he was. It's a reason why so many had him as the number 1 tackle, even though he didn't get drafted as such. And with Joe Alt's play style and the way and how he plays the game, that is not a good matchup for Bonito. It'll be interesting to see what the Broncos do to counter that. And it doesn't help that over like 60%, 70% of Bonito's pressures came with him being unblocked or blocked by a tight end. So hopefully Benito improves too, and hopefully it's a better matchup for the Broncos than we think, but I'm not saying it's going to be a terrible one, or not saying that, Benito won't win. It's going to be tough for him.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's on either side too. Both those tackles they're going to be a good tandem. I've been told recently, I'm a little more doom and gloom. Maybe I'm a little pessimistic, but I'm more so trying to temper expectations because, there's a lot of people who want us to make the playoffs or, 10 plus wins. And if that doesn't happen, and it's not typically you guys, it's more of those Twitter, Twitter trolls and whatnot, but saying we need to fire Sean Payton if we don't make the playoffs this season. It's like, maybe let's bring it down a little bit. Let's not get our hopes too high. Like I've said it several times before. This year is about learning and it's about building for 2025. And I think 25 is like more of a realistic expectation of where this team can go.
Yeah, I think they vastly exceeded expectations last year, which that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
That historic, I'll mention that every single time, that historic 5-game win streak with the turnover differential for the defense, it's historical for a reason. It's not easy to replicate. It's practically impossible. And it's not that we're trying to be negative or anything. We're just giving you our honest and pure takes. And Dylan, obviously, he's not a very, I don't want to say not an optimist, but leans more pessimistic, as he said. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows that I'm probably one of the most pessimistic people here at Mile High Huddle. Nick might edge me out slightly, but Nick actually tries to a little bit harder to balance things out than I do. It's just we're just here to give you our honest takes. Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, great show tonight. Eric and Dylan on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos. Thank you again, Michael, for joining us. And thank you, Mike, as well for the super chat. We appreciate it. Phil coming in and, well, before that, Mike Huddle, we could beat the Chargers when we were terrible. They also were without Justin Herbert. Like this last season, they were without Justin Herbert. We'll see what happens.
I'd say coaching's upgraded too.
With the coaching upgrade that they've had as well. We'll see what happens. Pessimism is often confused with realism. Yeah. That's very apt. And Phil McLaughlin coming in. Okay, now I'm excited again. Maybe 10 wins. Glad to get you excited again, Phil. Based on this discussion, what grade do you guys give special teams, offense, and defense right now? This is an interesting one because we always, whenever we do this, we always talk about position by position. Let's start with the offense. What grade would you give the offense right
now? I would have to say probably a solid C, maybe C minus. It just kind of depends with me, rookie quarterback. Obviously, it's Sean Payton's guy. It's who we wanted. But like I said, little down on the receiver room. I'm pretty hopeful for the running back room actually. But again, probably just me trying to temper expectations for a rookie in this offense.
See, I'd go C minus, and taking the quarterback position completely out of it, still so many questions at tight end, still so many questions at receiver, center, what's going to happen with Mike McGlinchey. There are still so many questions about this offense, even outside of the quarterback position. I'd give it a C minus just because of that. And then Bo Nix will have to, do extremely well to help carry or cover for certain areas potentially. And right now, still a lot waited to see. And then for defense, I would probably go with the D. As much as I'm in like this offensive line, the linebacker concerns me. Edge room, I'm excited for it with the improvements on the defensive line, but injuries are still a concern there. And then safety is, I know a lot of people are hyped for Brandon Jones, but being a rotational piece for his career and signing him to what they did, and there's been a lot of talk that he might not even be the starter. I have concern there. I'll probably look back on this and feel very foolish with this, but right now, defense is a D for me.
Yeah, D for defense, man. Hey, I agree with you. It's a lot of wait and see, especially with there's new pieces, but obviously you lose Justin Simmons. That really sucks. Defensive line's improved. Still no A+ guy at edge rusher. Linebackers we talked about a lot. Just not great. Yeah, I'd probably be a D there. And it's, what? I hope we look foolish after, ranking these because that would mean the Broncos did really good. And we'll move on to special teams. I'd say probably a solid B, maybe a B+, depending. We'll see how these new rules affect that. Who's going to be back there? Obviously, going to have Mims, but maybe you get a Blake Watson back there. Maybe Traymon Smith. We'll see.
Yeah. And for me with special teams, I'd go either from B to A-, and it completely depends on who is the punter.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I am really down on Riley Dixon as a punter. This dude for 2 years was, in 2022 and 2023 with where he was with everything. Corliss Waitman?
Mm-hmm.
He was right there with Corliss Waitman, and nobody cared. He's more consistently bad, whereas Corliss Waitman at least had some highs. Trenton Gill I think is better, and with him he'd give a little bit A minus. And then Todd coming in, going back to pessimism is often confused with realism, but people who think there are realistic, mass pessimistic views in that realistic veil. How do you know? How do you know that's what they're doing? Maybe to them they are just being realistic and it's not being pessimistic. And that's what one of the things that can be frustrating for us about this is that our intent with what we're saying doesn't always land, and things come off a lot more harsher than we're intending, or whatever the case may be. So just for me, if I'm never trying to be super pessimistic about this team, I'm just trying to say it with how I view it and be as real as I can. And Mike, the last time the Chargers beat us was in 2020 or 2022. So not last season, but the season before. So the last 4 games, and 2 of them were without Justin Herbert.
Houston Stick was out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing I always say with people saying, pessimistic, whatever. I promise you every day I'm cheering so loud for the Broncos. I may even pick them to lose that week, but I'm rooting for them to win all the time. I understand upside, all that stuff. It's just, I need to see it. I'm a guy who needs to really see it. And obviously I'm like, this guy has potential's that big word. I want to see it, especially after, maybe I'm just jaded at this point, but all these seasons of quarterback play and high expectations for the receivers and whatnot. I just need to see it at this point.
And with that's the thing too, is like, and for me, this happens the most after the draft when I'm down on a pick. Once they're drafted by the Broncos, I want them to succeed. I want them to make me look like a complete idiot when it comes to my pre-draft evaluation of them, because that's the best thing for the Broncos. And honestly, that's what I want. Like, I want the Broncos to be good. I like watching them when they're good. The last few years, watching them be terrible and going back and rewatching these games has been so mind-bogglingly frustrating. Because like some of the stuff you just don't expect to see from this, especially with the run defense last year, this poorly from professional teams, professional players, watching guys out there who look like they shouldn't even be on practice squads play. And then you're on the other side of the team, you're watching guys like Chris Jones. This is specifically about the defensive line and Jonathan Harris, and not even Chris Jones, but what's his name? The other 2 defensive linemen that the Chiefs have that are not nearly as good as him, but still are quite capable. I can't remember their names now, but it's just frustrating. But we still always want the Broncos to win. We always root for them to win. Even, I think the big topic of conversation when we're down for the meet and greet, when we're out to dinner at the table I was at, was do we want the Broncos to beat the Packers or not, because of how it could have helped them with draft position? And like, it was always tough for any of us to answer, because we want the Broncos to be good, and we felt that landing one of these top quarterbacks at the time, because Bo Nix wasn't up there in that conversation at the time, like Drake May or Caleb Williams, who they were in reach of, or do we want them to see them win now and possibly lose out on that? Fortunately, we got, in a way, the best of both worlds. They still got one of the top quarterbacks in their eyes and still win. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful about this team and be optimistic. And there's a lot of things that I am optimistic about with this team, but there are a lot of things that I'm just not super high on. And going back to Mike Gettle, and this one sucks, and I was hoping that it wouldn't be as bad as this. In the last 10 games, the Broncos are 3-7 against the Chargers. That hurts, and I'm sorry you got your blood boiling and all that, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about the Chargers. I mean, they've been beating up on the Broncos pretty badly over the years, so hopefully
the Raiders.
Hopefully all that changes this year, especially the Raiders.
Yeah, God. I don't care how good the Chiefs are. Obviously, that pisses me off. But obviously, living in California, and they're not here anymore, but Raiders fans everywhere.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Raider fans here too, and Raider fans, man, they're the worst. Anyways, guys, that's gonna do it for us. Sorry some of you guys missed us. It's been great having you on, Dylan. It's always great to get around chatting with you. With Lance down away for Father's Day, I may or may not be here next week, so it might be Lance and Dylan next week, with Dylan filling in for me. Next Friday is my wife and mine's wedding anniversary, so I gotta talk to her and see if she wants me to skip out on the pod for the night or go ahead and do it. But yeah, it's been great talking with you. It's been a fun conversation, even though it is a Ernie Mays coming in with the true comment here at the end. All 31 teams fans are the worst. Yes,
that's right.
Bronco fans are the best. Every other fans, they're whatever. So it's been great having you on. It's been great talking with you. Hope you had a good time. And are you on that tomorrow night too?
No, I'll be out for a wedding, so we'll. I'm not sure who will be hosting tomorrow night with Ron, but we will get that sorted out. I'm happy to be here. I've been bouncing around a lot these past couple of weeks, talking to people who I haven't really gotten one-on-ones with in terms of talking Broncos. So that's always fun. And yeah, I think we had a pretty great conversation tonight.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, especially this time of year, it can be tough to find interesting conversations to talk about that somebody else on the channel hasn't talked about already, especially because before I texted you this morning, I kind of took a quick look through the previous ones, and I had like 2 ideas going into it, and both those ideas were talked about in the last 6 days. So couldn't do those ones. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for a wonderful night. I don't normally do the run out, but here we go. I'll go through it real quick. You guys can follow us on Instagram at Mile High Huddle with an underscore between mile and high and huddle. You can go to mhhmerch.com to get your swag on. You can get wonderful hats like the Dove Valley Deep Divers hat or the wonderful orange shirt that I don't currently have on. I have a Hello Kitty shirt on that my daughter picked out for me. But you can get wonderful Dove Valley Deep Diver shirts as well as shirts and coffee mugs and all sorts of merch from the other shows. You guys make sure you guys are on Facebook.com. Go to Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod and like and follow there. Make sure you go to Twitter and follow the at Mile High Huddle Pod, Mile High Huddle Twitter account, the at Dove Valley Dove DVDD. I can't remember what it is now.
Underscore pod, I believe.
I think so. DVDD underscore pod. I think that's a Dove Valley Deep Drivers pod. At Mile High Huddle, you can get all of our when you follow that, you can get all our updates on all articles, all news, anything that we're going to be doing with anything with the site or the channel. Go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, a 5-star review for a chance. I think they're still doing a chance to win some swag each month, are they?
I believe so.
And of course, one of the things that you can do the most, that helps us the most, subscribe, like, and share, as you can see scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Those are some of the easiest ways that you guys can help us out, cost-free and even word of mouth. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, especially over the last couple of years or last couple of months, people coming up to me and saying, "Are you with Mile High Huddle?" Real quick, actually, when I was in Anchorage, not this last time, but the time before, when it was a little vacation for over Mother's Day weekend, was at the mall and had some guy come up and ask me if I'm familiar with Mile High Huddle and all that. And it's always cool when that happens. It's always, pretty humbling too, that you can just be out there and not expecting it and it still happen. But that is one of the best ways that you guys can help us out when you guys can't, especially with times so tough and may not be able to do so financially. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a wonderful night. I may or may not be back next week. Lance will be back next week. Dylan may be with him. But most of all, before we get out of here, happy Father's Day to all of you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.